At 6, a coroner rules that 10 entirely innocent people were killed in Belfast half a century ago, 9 of them shot by British soldiers. The end of a 50-year battle to clear the names of their dead relatives. Among those killed, a Catholic priest helping the wounded and a mother of 8. They died during the street violence that erupted after an army operation to detain paramilitaries without trial. This, the reaction today from a woman whose mother was killed.
The parachute regiment only had hate in their hearts when they gunned down her and the others. They were not peacemakers. They were not brave soldiers. They were nothing but cowards.
Also tonight, the state opening of Parliament. The Queen carries out her first major public engagement since the death of the Duke of Edinburgh as she sets out the government's plans. A teenage gunman in Russia opens fire at a school, killing at least 7 children and 2 adults as terrified pupils and staff try to flee. Police search a cafe in Gloucester in connection with the disappearance of a teenager more than 50 years ago.
And we're live at the Brit Awards. That's Mabel, who won Best Female last year. 4,000 ticket holders will get to go to the biggest indoor music event in the UK since the pandemic began.
And coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, all eyes on Old Trafford. If Manchester United lose to Leicester, Manchester City will be crowned Premier League champions.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. They died on the streets of West Belfast in 1971 at the start of the Troubles. 10 people were killed over the course of 3 days in the wake of an operation by the British Army to detain paramilitary suspects without trial, which prompted widespread street violence. Today, the families of those who were killed in Ballymurphy won their 50-year fight to clear the names of their relatives, when a coroner ruled that they had all been entirely innocent. 9 of the dead were shot by soldiers. The coroner said the 10th was either killed by British soldiers or paramilitaries, as she criticised the army for using disproportionate force. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy reports.
Northern Ireland's past continues to be carried into its present. A fresh inquest into the deaths of the Ballymurphy victims was brought about by their families' campaign. Today marked the culmination of a 50-year search for truth. In 1971, the army went into a housing estate in the Ballymurphy area of West Belfast to arrest and imprison IRA suspects without trial, known as internment.
The main target of the present operation is the Irish Republican Army, which has been responsible for recent acts of terrorism and whose victims have included Protestant and Catholic alike.
It sparked violent clashes over 3 days. By the end, 10 people lay dead. Among them, a local priest and a mother of 8. Soldiers from the parachute regiment, now given anonymity, claimed they opened fire after being attacked by IRA gunmen and rioters.
I saw this chap with a petrol bomb in his hand. I opened my cab door and I fired 1 round from a gun. It's a submachine gun. Fired it at him. He dropped.
You killed him?
I think so, yeah. Well, I know so now. I found out later on.
Soldiers at the time said those killed were armed. Their relatives always maintained they were innocent civilians. These were the people who died. Today, the coroner acknowledged the army had come under fire from gunmen in the area, but she concluded in most cases the use of force by the parachute regiment was disproportionate, and that all of those killed were entirely innocent of any wrongdoing. Inside court, relatives had applauded as the findings were read out.
Overwhelming. Overwhelming. Just was pissed over. We waited so long for this.
You pray and you pray and you ask for justice.
You got all the detail you were hoping for in that verdict?
Well, we knew, we always knew,
it's
but
just unbelievable.
To hear the world will know, the world will know now that,
and the world will know.
And
they're innocent.
They're innocent.
For all along, people would say, oh, they were this and they were that, but now it's all cleared up for us all.
The findings bring new clarity to one of the most brutal episodes of Northern Ireland's past. For decades, families felt their loved ones' names were tarred. Today, they've been publicly exonerated.
Today is a great day for our families, but it's also a bittersweet day. Today, personally, I think of my dear brother Frank, whose young life was taken by British paratroopers. He gave his life helping others, and as one of our witnesses said, he was very brave.
The parachute regiment only had hate in their hearts when they gunned down her and the others. They were not peacemakers. They were not brave soldiers. They were nothing but cowards.
There are hundreds of other killings from the Troubles which remain unresolved. In many areas of Northern Ireland, feelings of loss and injustice have endured through the decades. But for the families of Ballymurphy, now a new sense of vindication.
Well, it's been a very significant day for many people who remember the events that happened in this part of Belfast. The Ministry of Defence has said it will reflect on the findings of the inquest, but there are many more inquests to come involving killings from the Troubles. Now, it's understood that the government is still planning to bring in effectively a ban on prosecutions involving paramilitaries and veterans with regards to killings before 1998, but there will be a lot of opposition to that here. There is still a great depth of feeling when it comes to getting justice for loved ones in Northern Ireland, no matter how much time has passed.
Emma Vardy, thank you. The Queen has unveiled the government's plans for legislation for the year ahead at the state opening of Parliament. It was the Queen's first major public appearance since the death of the Duke of Edinburgh last month. The Queen's speech contained 30 bills. They include infrastructure investment around the UK to strengthen economic ties across the Union, legislation to support what the government says will be a lifetime guarantee for skills and training. Changes to the planning system to allow more homes to be built will be brought forward, along with binding environmental targets, plus plans for long-delayed online safety laws, bringing regulation to the internet to tackle illegal content. Here's our political editor, Laura Kuensberg.
A red letter day round here, preparing for the visit from the monarch, the official new start for this palace. But some of the colour, some of the pageantry, less formal because of COVID. And the lonely crown. The Queen's 67th state opening. The first since Prince Philip passed away. But some of the refrains were the same.
Close the door.
The bang on the door. The Prime Minister's plans. In her voice.
My government will level up opportunities across all parts of the United Kingdom.
The jargon confirmed from the throne. The government wants everyone to have the same chance wherever they live. So, promises on transport, health, education, catching up after the COVID crisis.
My government will strengthen the economic ties across the Union. Legislation will support a lifetime skills guarantee.
And after the emergency, new laws planned since the election manifesto.
Legislation will increase sentences for the most serious and violent offenders and ensure the timely administration of justice. Measures will be brought forward to establish a fairer immigration system that strengthens the United Kingdom's borders.
But as the Queen's first big job since Prince Philip's funeral was over, she left arguments for the government behind. Tory rows on planning, tangles with the opposition over the Constitution, or voters being asked to show ID. Nor was there a speck of detail on how we care for the vulnerable, leaving the opposition deeply unimpressed.
Order! This Queen's speech merely papers over the cracks. It's packed with short-term gimmicks and distant promises. This government's never short of those. But it misses the urgency and the scale of the transformation that's needed.
But the Prime Minister was bullish, fresh from election success.
We must use this opportunity to achieve a national recovery so that jabs, jabs, jabs becomes jobs, jobs, jobs. That is our plan, Mr. Speaker, and to address the decades-old problems that have held us back.
The Tories, though, have had 11 years in charge, not lost on the other parties.
We know the past Westminster has imposed, and we now know the future that it will inflict. Westminster has chosen its future: a job-destroying Brexit, a return to austerity cuts and more attacks and devolution.
I'm sorry that this government's programme simply doesn't deliver the fairer, greener, more caring plan for recovery which our country needs. Liberal Democrats will oppose it.
After a year of politics as usual being frozen, this Queen's speech is a sign of things getting back to normal. Ministers hope to make progress beyond the pandemic, and the opposition parties perhaps starting to confront reality of dealing with a government with the brute force of a huge majority behind it. Symbols, tradition, so much stays the same, but the only permanent thing in politics is moving on. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
So the government says it will bring forward proposals on reforming social care in England, but campaigners say they're disappointed there weren't any details today. Our social affairs correspondent Alison Holt is with me now. It's an issue that's very much been highlighted by the pandemic, but there wasn't a great deal of detail today.
No, there wasn't. I mean, it's nearly 2 years since the Prime Minister arrived in Downing Street and said he had a clear plan to fix social care once and for all. And the pandemic has absolutely highlighted the importance of that care system. Today we got just 9 words. Proposals on social care reform will be brought forward. Now, the expectation was that the mention would be brief, but not that brief. People were hoping, at the very least, for some indication of the timescale of when we would get details. One of the largest organisations representing care providers has said, how long can the care system limp on like this after years of underfunding and dealing with increasing demand? Now, my understanding is that the government is determined to go ahead with its reforms. It understands the pressures on the system, but the sticking point is always the money. And how much is it going to cost? How will that money be raised? To quote one expert in the field, the question that we need answering is this funding reform? So is it just about the money, for instance, perhaps putting a cap on catastrophic care costs for some people? Or is it about funding for reform? So a wider vision for what we need for the future in terms of care for everyone, not just older people, but for people under the age of 65 who need help. And sitting here today, after those 9 words, we are none the wiser.
Alison Holt, thank you. Well, one of the key messages from today's Queen's speech was a government promise to spread opportunity equally across the country, a pledge the government's been trying to deliver on since the Conservatives started taking seats from Labour in parts of the Midlands and the north of England. The next battleground will be Batley and Spen after the constituency's MP, Tracy Brabin, resigned following her election as the Mayor for West Yorkshire. The Tories will be pushing hard to take the seat. From there, our political correspondent Alex Forsyth reports.
In the heart of Batley, this charity's getting back on its feet after the pandemic. It grows organic food. The focus is providing for the community, and they have a clear idea of what's needed in theirs.
And we need to invest in our own. At the moment, my daughter, she's qualified, but she's looking at jobs in cities. I mean, that's no good.
I think we don't have many opportunities here, and that's why I go elsewhere, into the cities.
Batley was once a thriving textile town. Like many, its economy has slowed. Its high streets quietened. Jobs are less stable. It's the kind of place being promised a lot by government. Today, it was talk of house building and investment in skills. Some born and bred here can see the appeal.
I think it's welcome. It's much needed. There's a lot of communities that have been left behind before the COVID pandemic, and more so communities are going to need a lot more support, help, encouragement in order to provide a better future for communities up and down the country, and Batley is no different.
There is scepticism here though. At the local food bank they see entrenched poverty.
I think there is a big disparity between areas of the south and areas of the north, and I think areas like this one have suffered tremendously during the periods of austerity since 2010, and a lot of services and facilities have been stripped out of the local community, and they won't come back just like that in a levelling up promise.
These arguments will play out here this summer as the region picks a new MP. It's been Labour for years. It was once the seat of Jo Cox. Almost 5 years since her murder, her legacy's clear. Political memories can run deep. There are those, though, who think this Brexit-backing seat could now turn blue.
There'll be a lot riding on the contest here. For the Conservatives, can they convince people they will deliver what they've promised? For Labour, the stakes are much higher. They have to come up with an offer to stop them shedding support in this part of the country, or there'll be more serious questions about where the party's headed.
This is a town at a crossroads.
I don't think the Conservatives really stand a chance, but that's just me, and I'm hoping they don't anyway.
Batley has always been a Labour stronghold. The times that we're in now, I think it's time for a change.
This is a community weighing up its choices, waiting to be convinced. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Batley.
Police are searching a cafe in Gloucester for the body of a 15-year-old girl who is thought to have been murdered more than 50 years ago by one of Britain's most notorious serial killers, Fred West. Officers have been called to the cafe after a production company filming a documentary there said they'd found evidence that a body could be buried at the property. Phil Mackey reports.
The black and white pictures may have faded a little, but Mary Bastom's friends and family have kept her memory alive. She disappeared 53 years ago, and despite extensive investigations both then and since, she's never been found. When evidence emerged that the serial killer Fred West had murdered up to a dozen women and young girls in and around Gloucester, her name came up as part of the investigation, but he wasn't charged in connection with her disappearance.
3 bodies have been found here, including the daughter and lodger of the accused man, Frederick West.
Now there's a potentially significant development. This is the cafe where Mary worked. Fred West was a customer and had carried out some building work here.
Back in 1994, there were suggestions that Mary Bastom could have been buried here, and in 2012 there was a petition from her friends urging Gloucestershire Police to excavate the site. So this new breakthrough might finally bring answers for Mary's family.
Gloucestershire Police say they're likely to be at the site for several weeks. Mary's family is being kept informed and have asked for privacy to allow them time to grieve. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Gloucester.
The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. A coroner rules that 10 entirely innocent people were killed in Belfast half a century ago, 9 of them shot by British soldiers. And the red carpet is out, but it's not just the stars arriving for the Brit Awards. 4,000 lucky ticket holders will watch tonight's event in person and without masks.
Coming up on Sports Day on the BBC News channel, more on the debate around where this month's UEFA Champions League final between Chelsea and Manchester City will be held.
At least 7 children and 2 adults have been killed in a shooting at a school in Russia. More than 20 others were injured, many seriously. Some children jumped out of 3rd-floor windows to try to escape. Police have arrested the suspected attacker, a 19-year-old former pupil. He'd been carrying an automatic weapon and was wearing an explosives vest. Our Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg reports.
In this Russian school, a day of learning became a day of bloodshed. School 175 was under attack. This CCTV footage appears to show the gunman on his way there, weapon at the ready. When the shooting began, there was panic. Some children tried to get away by jumping from windows. Others barricaded themselves in classrooms and then escaped this way, down a ladder, with their parents looking on. Irina's daughter was in the school. She sent me a text message, Irina says. "I love you, Mum." I called another parent. We didn't know what was happening, but we could see smoke rising from the school. The attacker was eventually taken into custody. He's said to be a 19-year-old former student of the school. Later, he reportedly claimed to believing he was God and said he was driven by hatred. All day, people have been coming to the school to honour the victims. Set up outside a makeshift shrine of flowers and candles. And one Russian word, skorbim, we mourn. What happened here has shocked not only this city, but the entire country. In Russia, school shootings are relatively rare. And in response to this tragedy, President Putin has ordered an urgent review of gun control laws. Kazan is struggling to come to terms with this tragedy. The question you hear people asking most here is why? Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Kazan.
The United Nations has appealed for calm between Israel and the Palestinians as violence continues to escalate. There have been more Israeli airstrikes against Gaza, where the government health ministry says at least 26 people have been killed. Palestinian militant groups have fired more rockets into southern Israel, killing 2 Israelis. Tension has erupted during Ramadan around the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem. The complex is a highly sensitive site, sacred to both Muslims and Jews. The UK's financial watchdog has opened an investigation into the collapsed finance firm Sill Capital. Its founder, the Australian banker Lex Greensill, has been appearing before MPs, speaking publicly for the first time about what happened. He says he takes complete responsibility and insists there has been no loss to the British taxpayer. It comes as the Treasury Committee published texts from David Cameron revealing the extent of his lobbying for the firm. Our business editor, Simon Jack, is with me, and there were a lot of texts, more than 40 of them.
Yeah, what's revealed, Sophie, is a very intense bout of lobbying over a period last year from March, April and May on behalf of his then new employer, Sill Capital. And it's a who's who of Treasury ministers and civil servants. John Glenn, Economic Secretary to the Treasury. Hi, John. David Cameron here. Could I have a quick word? There's a problem with SME, small business lending, and the Treasury, and I know you can fix it. And that I know you can fix. Thanks so much. Call this number any time. And then to the Chancellor himself, first thing would be fine, Rishi. I can imagine how busy you must be. You're doing a great job. Keep going. And then to Michael Gove, speaking to Rishi first thing tomorrow. If I'm still stuck, can I call you then? Now, that was the David Cameron text, and he's going to be appearing on Thursday. We then heard part 2 was Lex Greensill appearing, and he was explaining how and why his business went bust with a threat to Sanjeev Gupta's steel empire and 5,000 jobs. He arrived with an apology, but he had to face some tough questions about the honesty and integrity of his business. One MP saying, "Are you a fraudster?" To which he replied, "No." He did not answer direct questions about his relationship with Sanjeev Gupta, saying the FCA, the financial watchdog, had opened an investigation into that relationship, which could have a potentially criminal dimension. But as I say, David Cameron and some of these lobbying questions will be put to him on Thursday.
Simon Jack, thank you. A 21-year-old man has appeared in court charged with the murder of a 53-year-old police community support officer. Julia James was found dead 2 weeks ago near her home in Kent. She'd suffered serious head injuries. John Donnison reports.
Julia James, who disappeared last month after taking her dog for a walk in Woodland in Snowdown in Kent. Today, using an actress and Julia's actual Jack Russell Terrier Toby, police staged a reconstruction of her last known movements. Officers say they've already received more than 1,000 pieces of information from members of the public, but say their investigation is very much ongoing.
I continue to appeal for witnesses. I am confident that there were people in the area at the time that we are yet to speak to. It's absolutely crucial. We have an obligation to piece together exactly what happened in the last moments of Julia's life.
And appearing to gesture to reporters outside court in Chatham this morning, this is the man who police believe killed her, 21-year-old Callum Wheeler from Aylsham. This initial hearing for Callum Wheeler lasted only around 5 minutes. He spoke just to confirm his name, his age and his address. He was remanded in custody and will appear at Maidstone Crown Court on Thursday, charged with Julia James's murder. It's exactly 2 weeks since Julia James's body was found. The case is expected to go to trial early next year. John Donnison, BBC News in Chatham in Kent.
Lockdown restrictions will be eased in Scotland from Monday. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said she felt emotional as she told people they could hug their loved ones again. Pubs will be allowed to sell alcohol indoors. 6 people from 3 households will be able to meet in each other's homes. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon is in Glasgow for us tonight. So restrictions are being eased across Scotland, but not for everyone.
Yes, Sophie, one probable exception will be the council area of Moray in the north of Scotland, where cases have been surging, which the authorities have been working hard to bring under control. Elsewhere in Scotland, though, next Monday we'll see some pretty big changes. I think for many people, the most significant will be the fact that they'll be allowed in small groups back into each other's homes, and while there, will be allowed to hug family and friends again. They'll also be allowed to stay overnight. It does create an anomaly, though, because physical distancing will remain in place in other settings. But of the other changes coming into force next week, more venues will be allowed to reopen, including cinemas, theatres and bingo halls. There'll be a further relaxation of the restrictions around hospitality. Outdoor contact sport and indoor group exercises will be allowed to resume, and some foreign travel to a limited number of destinations will be allowed, as Scotland brings in a traffic light system similar to that system already announced in England. Nicola Sturgeon, though, did urge people to think seriously about whether to take holidays overseas. And of the changes more widely next week, the First Minister said they were the most important yet and had been very hard-earned.
Lorna, thank you. Boris Johnson has said a public inquiry into the government's handling of the pandemic could be held within a year. Speaking in the Commons today, the Prime Minister said a full inquiry was essential. The latest data shows there were 2,474 new COVID infections in the past 24 hours, with 20 deaths recorded. More than 35 million people have now had their first dose of a vaccine. That's over 67% of the UK's adult population. And more than 18 million people have now had both jabs. So more than 34% of all adults are now fully vaccinated. And finally, 4,000 people are at London's O2 Arena tonight for the Brit Awards. No face masks, no social distancing. This glimpse of what life used to look like is all part of the government's research programme into how events can return to normal. And our entertainment correspondent Colin Patterson is live on the red carpet for us. Colin.
Still very different to any Brit Awards I've covered before, though. If you look at the red carpet, you'll see, oh, there's Jessie Ware, nominated for Best Album and Best Female. You'll see how far they are keeping the stars away from the reporters speaking to them. But 4,000 fans will be allowed inside, more than half those tickets going to frontline key workers. They've got to have a ticket, and there's one other thing they've got to have.
Negative. Clear. Negative.
The hottest ticket in town, a negative COVID test. Everyone at tonight's Brits needs one, the audience and the stars.
Sticks a swab right down the back of your neck and you're a little bit.
Not your normal preparation for the Brit Awards, is it?
No, not really.
Rag and Bone Man's tested negative, so will be performing with Pink and the NHS Choir, singing in front of an audience for the first time in more than a year.
I feel like it's going to be emotional. Like, I think we might have to hold back a couple of tears because, yeah, I don't know if I'm fully emotionally prepared for it. I mean, I just miss it so much.
4,000 fans will be in the O2 Arena. No social distancing, no masks, because the Brits are part of the government's pilot scheme for reopening live events.
How nervous do you feel?
There is a bit, I'll be honest, there is a little bit, because this is the first
time we've been out since the whole pandemic.
I love music, so the fact that I can go to an arena, no social distancing when we're there, and actually like have fun.
And scientists will be monitoring everything.
We have installed roughly 40 cameras to understand how people are moving around the site, but we're also making use of security systems. We're making use of the data that comes from the bar, just to understand how people are spreading themselves throughout the venue.
The stars have just started to arrive on the COVID-compliant red carpet.
Being back on the Brit stage, I wanted to do something different, something special, so there's pressure that comes with that, but I'm very excited. It's different and it's fun, and just decided to go a little bit out there with the performance, but make it very London. So
this year's Brits are about a lot more than who wins the awards. If all goes well, the event could help bring about the return of live music all around the UK. Colin Patterson, BBC News, London's O2 Arena.
Time now for a look at the weather with Chris Fawkes.
Hi Sophie, thanks a lot. And it's been another dramatic day of thunderclouds. This was one of those,
Working across the skies in Shropshire, Momartis here. Always a sign of a vigorous storm. And then look at this, Ballygwynedd getting a covering of hail. Kind of made things look like winter had come back to haunt us. Now on the satellite picture you can see these various big storm systems working their way northwards at the moment, and they're going to continue. We've got downpours widely at the moment across the Midlands, Wales, Northern England, and they are going to be moving into Scotland, and eventually we'll see some rain arriving probably across eastern counties of Northern Ireland towards the end of the night. Temperatures similar to last night, 6 or 7 degrees. Gradually the weather becoming a little bit calmer later in the night across southern areas. Now tomorrow, same area of low pressures with us, the same one that's been with us now for ages. So it's going to be another showery day. Get bursts of rain pushing northwards in Scotland. Much greater chance of seeing some showers and thunderstorms in Northern Ireland. And again, we've got those storms developing across England and Wales. But with bigger gaps between those showers, you do have a better chance of dodging the downpours. The wind's a bit lighter, so feeling a bit warmer in that May sunshine. But the Channel Islands, a little area of low pressure here will bring some rain. And there is a chance that that low could be a bit further northwards. If that happens, well, we may well see some of that rain working into the south of England as well. Now by Thursday we've got a familiar look to our weather picture. Again, sunshine and showers developing, although there'll probably be some longer outbreaks of rain for some across parts of England and Wales. Temperatures haven't really changed very much either. 14 to 16 degrees, light winds in the May sunshine. It's still going to feel pretty pleasant. Now, our area of low pressure is finally going to ease away later in the week, but it's just going to be replaced by another one into the weekend, and that puts us right back to square one, with showers through the forecast as we go through the weekend and lasting well into next week as well. Sophie.
Thanks, Chris. A reminder now of our main story this evening. A coroner rules that 10 entirely innocent people were killed in Belfast half a century ago, 9 of them shot by British soldiers. Among those killed, a Catholic priest helping the wounded and a mother of 8. That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.